That has killed close to 230,000 Americans, and new record surges of COVID-19. They're hitting 90,000 a day in the United States. Donald Trump's closing campaign argument is this: it's all overblown. It's as if he's unaware of the hard numbers. Donald Trump is barnstorming key states, repeating that the COVID corner has been turned and no one will talk about the pandemic after November 4th, as if COVID is a political attack ad and not a deadly virus. Will this message help give Donald Trump a second term? What else can he do to win? Let's find out. Joining us now is the former White House press secretary to President Donald Trump. He was also the communications director and chief strategist for the Republican National Committee and the author of a new book, Leading America, President Trump's Commitment to People, Patriotism, and Capitalism, Sean Spicer. Sean Spicer, great to have you on the program. Donald Trump is behind in the polls, if people believe the polls. Does he have a path to victory right now, Sean Spicer?
Absolutely. I mean, remember, at the end of the day, this is an election about electoral votes in each state. He was behind in the polls, and he frankly didn't win the popular vote last time. The question is, can he get to 270? He won 306 electoral votes last time, so he actually has 36 that he could shed and still get to 270. But I think on election night, he needs to hold those key East Coast swing states: Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and then Pennsylvania eventually. If he loses any four of those, I think it's going to be almost impossible, but definitely a huge challenge to win the election.
He's got a pretty baffling closing message from the Canadian point of view, and I know you spent 8 months as his press secretary, but from the Canadian point of view, he seems to be not telling the truth or flat out lying about the pandemic. You know, he's admitted on tape he downplayed the severity to Bob Woodward. He's now telling Americans they've rounded the corner. A vaccine is weeks away. He says on November 4th, no one's going to talk about it. But you and I both, there were 90,000 cases in the past week, record number of cases, 230,000 Americans dead. How does he justify rhetoric that doesn't seem to have a relationship to reality?
Well, I mean, look, again, it's not my job now to communicate his thoughts. I mean, that's the White House and the campaign. So what I would say is, you know, he has got to figure out how he wants to communicate what his team is doing about eradicating COVID and where they are in terms of vaccines. Honestly, that's not something I'm obviously in the loop on, but I think COVID is becoming more and more of an issue. For a while there in August and September, the riots and the looting allowed law and order to really get to the top of the agenda. That was good for the Trump campaign. But as COVID comes back in, you know, and the president himself had to struggle with it, I think that changes the game a bit. How he deals with it in the final end will have an impact on where I think he ultimately gets the vote, because had it not been for COVID, with the economy that he had, I think he would have easily been reelected.
Again, you're not part of the campaign now, but you were. When you heard that Donald Trump told Bob Woodward, look, I'm going to downplay this. There's new tapes of Jared Kushner says he's taken on the doctors. And he just said this past week, other than the fake news that wants to scare everybody, we're absolutely rounding the corner. He knows that's not true. Dr. Fauci knows that's not true. Like, was there any pushback inside saying, Mr. President, you're not telling the truth? Did that ever happen inside the White House? And what was his response?
Well, okay, so you know, one of the things that's important to understand is that and again, I'm not privy to the conversations about what information the president gets and doesn't get with respect to the virus. I see the case counts, obviously, and obviously we as a country and individual states are dealing with COVID. It's still impacting us. There's a difference between, you know, patently misstating a fact and being optimistic and spinning the truth. Every politician, probably everywhere in the world, spins the facts to their side, or, you know, creates an optimistic idea of where we are. You know, if you ask, I mentioned this to another colleague yesterday, I think the president is by nature a marketer and an optimist, and I think that that's kind of what he's conveying. Hey, we're going to beat this thing. We're rounding the corner. We're weeks away from the vaccine. That's who he's always been.
But I mean, to be fair, I get political spin. There's a difference between spin and flat out lies when it comes to case counts, death count, telling people that you're rounding the curve, not encouraging people to wear masks. And again, when Dr. Fauci's saying that's super dangerous, and you know he doesn't tell the truth on a lot of things. Go ahead.
Okay, but here's the thing. This is where I have a problem with some of the. The president may not have been the best example of mask wearing, but I don't think he's ever said don't wear a mask. So let's be clear. I think that there are things that I would have advised the White House from a visual standpoint when it comes to COVID that would have made sense. In other words, there are things that you do as a leader that, you know, you do because you want to project the right thing to do or the right behavior. I think the White House definitely could have done that better. But I think to say that he didn't encourage, he told people not to wear a mask, to quote you, is patently false.
To be fair, he's literally telling people COVID's, no one's going to talk about it on November 4th. But let's just move. Okay, the pandemic is one thing.
See, this is the thing. And this is where
Go
you
ahead.
were asking. We have this problem with American journalists as well, is you said something. You said he encourages people not to wear a mask. That's not true.
Sean, if you want to look, I'd be delighted to spend all morning talking about Donald Trump's factual lies and whether there have been times where he said, I don't wear a mask. Right? Sometimes he changes his view. You know that, and I know that. You know. I mean, if you want to just pick and choose, Sean, you know that. But come on, let's be fair. The guy has no relationship to the truth on fundamental issues, including the virus.
See, you want to hold Trump to a standard, but then no one else is held to the same standard. If we want to talk about the truth, then let's talk about it, and let's hold everyone to that same standard.
But of course, there are multiple examples of the president not encouraging people to wear masks, either in person or at his rallies. Check this out.
This is voluntary. I don't think I'm going to be doing it.
I don't agree with the statement that if everybody wear a mask, everything disappears. And as you know, masks cause problems too.
Maybe they're great, and maybe they're just good. Maybe they're not so good.
Can I ask you, again, I'm trying to understand strategy. You're a strategist. And for Canadians, Donald Trump is accusing Joe Biden of corruption. The allegations on the laptop, whether it's Ukraine or China. I'm just trying to understand strategically, why would a guy who has never released his tax returns, and Joe Biden has, so we know his money, where Donald Trump's two sons promised to run the business and not be involved in politics. They're his chief political surrogates. Donald Trump hired his son-in-law and his daughter, who are still profiting from their business. I mean, it goes on and on. 14 Trump aid donors have been indicted or in prison. Why would he want to make corruption and family conflicts a key campaign issue? It seems self-defeating, doesn't it? I do not understand that strategy.
Look, I think because, to be blunt, I think you want to level the playing field and say, take an issue off the table, right? Which is, I think that's an embarrassment what the U.S. media has been doing in coordination with big tech with respect to this Hunter Biden thing. I don't know. I honest to God don't know, what's I don't know, true or not, if you will, in terms of the laptop. I haven't examined it, but I will say this: there's enough evidence to come out, and clearly this gentleman, Bobulinski, who's come out, has recordings and other things that, he's a former naval officer with one of the highest security clearances this country grants, and yet our media and big tech have censored it. You've got to ask yourself, why is that happening?
But is that true? Let me just say something, because I haven't seen the laptop either. But the evidence is Bobulinski had one email that talked about the big guy. We don't know if they allege it refers to Joe Biden. No one's seen this laptop. Even people at the New York Post didn't want to be part of it. Even the evidence was lost in the mail. Like, throwing out sort of conspiracy theories to level the playing field, is that what it's come to? I'm trying to figure out, is that what it's come to?
I don't disagree with some of your analysis, but the funny thing is, where was the same skepticism and concern when the Steele dossier came out unverified, and yet CNN and BuzzFeed and other places ran with it as gospel truth?
To be fair, this conspiracy theory about the media's victimizing the right.
It's not a conspiracy theory. It's true.
Well, to be fair, first of all, on the Mueller investigation, there was a series of investigations that were followed very factually. The allegations about corruption against Joe Biden, you have seen very little. Why would that be elevated to become a major campaign issue unless there was more verifiable truth? I haven't seen the laptop. You haven't seen it. Very few people have seen it. Why? How can anyone report on something other than being innuendo and allegation as a form of political strategy?
I think that's a great. You and I are on the same page on that. But then apply that same standard to the Steele dossier and say, here you had unverified by the intelligence agencies saying that it is literally unverified, uncorroborated. There is a double standard, and that is not a question of. If you want to talk about fairness, there is no question. There is a different standard when it comes to the right in Donald Trump and when it comes to the left in Joe Biden.
All right, I got to leave it there. Sean Spicer, thanks so much. That is Sean Spicer, the former press secretary to President Donald Trump.